Did you know that 1 in 4 Australian households are now skipping meals just to keep the lights on? Or that nearly half of Aussie families couldn't cover an unexpected $500 bill without going into debt? It's not just a few people doing it tough. It's millions, quietly drowning in a crisis no one's really talking about. We hear about the cost of living all the time. But what's really driving this pressure? Why does it feel like no matter how hard you work, it's never enough? This isn't just about higher grocery bills or rent hikes. It's about a system that's slowly squeezing families dry, and it's happening in ways you might not expect. From hidden fees to collapsing support systems, today we're breaking down 10 shocking reasons Australian families are struggling to survive, and why things may be worse than they seem. Stick around, you need to hear this. Number 10. Government support isn't keeping up. Here's the hard truth. Australia's social safety net is no longer catching those who fall, and for many families, it's not even close. While the cost of everything from rent to electricity has soared over the past decade, government payments have barely budged. The result? A growing number of everyday Australians are slipping below the poverty line, even while receiving welfare or working full-time. Take JobSeeker, for example. The base rate currently sits well below what's considered a livable income, leaving recipients to choose between food, housing, or healthcare. Single parents on parenting payments are in a similar boat, with benefits that haven't kept up with inflation, let alone with the rising costs of raising a child. And let's not forget about carers, students, or the elderly, many of whom are surviving on outdated payment structures that no longer reflect the reality of modern expenses. What's even more alarming is that these payments are often tied to strict eligibility rules and wait times, which means many people are left in financial limbo for weeks or months. Imagine losing your job, applying for support, and then having to wait 6 weeks for your first payment, all while rent, bills, and groceries keep piling up. This isn't just a failure of policy, it's a systemic issue that's pushing families deeper into poverty while politicians debate over cents. And unless serious reforms are made, the gap between the cost of living and the support offered will only continue to grow wider. So, what's the real cost of government inaction? It's stress, debt, broken families, and children growing up in financial insecurity. If you believe this issue deserves more attention, hit the like button and let us know in the comments. Do you think government support is enough in today's economy? Number 9. Hidden taxes and fees are everywhere. It's not just your rent or groceries draining your wallet. It's the invisible costs that sneak up on you every single day. From the moment you leave your driveway, you're hit with toll roads, registration fees, insurance premiums, and licensing costs. And that's before you even make it to work. These hidden expenses are often overlooked because they're scattered. A small fee here, an automatic deduction there, but over time they add up to thousands of dollars each year. Need to pay a bill late because your pay hasn't come in yet? That's a late payment penalty. Want to use your own money from the ATM? Here's a transaction fee. Even renewing your driver's license or car rego can feel like a mini financial hit. And it's not just limited to transportation or banking. Everyday services like childcare, education, and even public healthcare now come with unexpected charges. A free school might still charge hundreds in tech levies, excursion fees, and uniforms. A routine doctor's visit might result in an unexpected gap payment, especially if your area lacks bulk billing GPs. These kinds of charges don't make headlines, but they slowly chip away at household budgets, leaving families constantly on edge. It's death by 1,000 cuts, and it's uniquely punishing for those already on tight budgets. When every dollar is accounted for, even a $15 admin fee can push someone into overdraft. The worst part? Many of these charges are built into essential services, meaning you can't just opt out. Whether it's renewing a passport, paying for prescription medication, or covering rising council rates, you're stuck paying. In the end, it's not just about big expenses. It's the constant financial drip feed that's exhausting Australians and making financial stability feel out of reach, no matter how carefully they budget. Number 8. Health and dental care are out of reach. In a country like Australia, you'd expect healthcare to be easily accessible, but for many families, that's far from reality. While Medicare does cover basic medical services, the out-of-pocket costs for everything else, especially dental care, have become shockingly unaffordable. Let's start with the dentist. A simple checkup and clean can cost over $200, and if you need fillings, extractions, or a root canal, you could be looking at thousands of dollars. The problem? Dental care isn't fully covered under Medicare unless you qualify for limited public programs, which often have long wait lists and strict eligibility. For most families, this means putting off dental visits until the pain is unbearable. And by then, the costs have only gotten worse. But it's not just teeth. Many Australians are also struggling to access GPs, specialists, mental health care, and allied health services like physiotherapy or speech therapy. As bulk billing clinics disappear across the country, it's becoming harder to find affordable medical support, especially in regional or low-income areas. Even with a Medicare rebate, the gap fees for a specialist can range from $50 to over $150 per visit, making follow-up care financially out of reach. This delay in care doesn't just hurt wallets, it affects health outcomes. People are avoiding treatment, skipping medications, or relying on emergency departments for problems that should have been caught early. Chronic conditions worsen, mental health declines, and preventable issues become major emergencies. The irony is clear. Australia has a world-class healthcare system on paper, but in practice, it's becoming a luxury for those who can afford it. When families are forced to choose between a medical appointment and putting food on the table, it's a sign that something is deeply broken, and it's costing lives. Number 7, school costs are rising. Even in public education in Australia is supposed to be free, but for many families, sending a child to school now feels like a financial burden they can barely afford. From the outside, it seems like kids just need a backpack and a lunchbox. But in reality, parents are now facing hundreds, even thousands of dollars in school-related expenses each year, even in government-run schools. Let's break it down. There are voluntary contributions that often feel anything but voluntary. Many schools now charge annual fees for curriculum support, learning materials, and general upkeep. Then there's the growing list of additional costs: school uniforms that can cost over $400 per child, tech levies for laptops or tablets, excursions, camps, book lists, sports equipment, and transport. And if a child has learning support needs or wants to take part in extracurricular activities, the price tag goes up even more. These expenses aren't always obvious at the start of the school year. They creep in gradually, leaving parents scrambling to keep up. And for families with multiple children, the financial pressure multiplies quickly. What's worse is that many parents feel embarrassed to admit they're struggling, even skipping payments quietly or pulling their kids out of activities to avoid the shame. For children, the impact can be devastating. When they can't join a school camp, don't have the right uniform, or miss out on classroom resources, it creates a sense of exclusion and inequality, all in an environment that's supposed to offer equal opportunity. Despite government claims that public education is accessible for all, the reality is that the cost of learning has become a hidden barrier. For low and middle income families, education is no longer the great equalizer. It's yet another area where the cost of living crisis is holding their children back. Number 6, the two-income trap is real. There was a time when one income could comfortably support an Australian household. Today, that idea feels almost impossible. For most families, having both parents working full-time isn't a luxury, it's a necessity. But here's the catch. While two incomes might look good on paper, in reality, many families are caught in what experts call the two-income trap. The more both parents work, the higher their combined income. But so too are their expenses. Childcare becomes a major cost, often eating up a significant portion of one partner's wage. Add to that the rising costs of commuting, work-related expenses like clothing or meals, and the need for convenience services like takeaway food or cleaners just to stay afloat, and suddenly the second income isn't stretching as far as it should. Worse still, the lifestyle shift means families have less time, more stress, and increasing burnout. Parents are exhausted, kids spend more time in after-school care or in front of screens, and household responsibilities turn into constant juggling acts. The emotional toll is huge: strained relationships, mental fatigue, and a persistent feeling of falling behind no matter how hard you work. Then there's the risk factor. In a single-income household, one job loss is tough. But in a two-income trap, losing just one income often sends the whole system crashing. Families are living with no financial buffer, tied to mortgages or rent payments that assume both incomes will always be there. This trap leaves families stuck, unable to cut back hours without financial fallout, yet unable to keep pushing without burning out. It's a no-win situation, created by a cost of living environment that demands more while giving less in return. And it's reshaping family life in ways that are silently but profoundly damaging. Number 5. Utility bills are becoming unmanageable. For many Australian families, opening the electricity or gas bill has become a moment of genuine fear. What used to be a manageable monthly expense is now a budget-breaking blow, with power bills soaring to levels that simply don't make sense for the average household. Over the last few years, energy prices have doubled in some areas, and despite political promises and energy market reforms, there's little sign of meaningful relief. The reasons behind the surge are complex, from privatization of energy companies and aging infrastructure to global fuel price shocks and policy uncertainty. But the outcome is simple. Families are paying more than ever just to keep the lights on, cook dinner, or stay warm during winter. In colder states like Victoria and Tasmania, heating is essential, yet many households are now limiting how often they use heaters, layering up indoors, or living in just one room to conserve power. In the summer months, especially during heat waves, families in northern states are doing the same with air conditioning, putting health at risk to save a few dollars on the next bill. Water bills are climbing too, alongside rising council rates and waste collection fees, all of which are core services families can't avoid. Even modest usage is now being penalised, and families with kids, elderly relatives, or special needs face even higher consumption costs they simply can't cut back on. And for renters, the situation is even worse. Most don't have the power to install solar panels, energy-efficient appliances, or insulation, which means they're stuck in poorly designed homes that cost more to run and save less. When staying warm or keeping the fridge running becomes a financial decision, it's clear the cost of living crisis isn't just hurting wallets, it's impacting health, comfort, and quality of life in the most basic, human ways. Number 4. Groceries and essentials are up by 30-50%. Walk into any supermarket today and it's impossible not to feel the sting of rising prices. Basic groceries and household essentials have skyrocketed, with many items now costing 30% to 50% more than they did just a few years ago. What used to be a $100 weekly shop can now easily creep past $150. And that's for the same basket of everyday items. Staples like milk, bread, eggs, meat, and fresh vegetables have all seen dramatic price hikes. Even pantry basics like rice, pasta, and cooking oil, once cheap and reliable, have become budget stretchers. And it's not just food. Toilet paper, cleaning products, personal hygiene items all have quietly increased in price, often in smaller packaging for the same cost. This practice, known as shrinkflation, means consumers are paying more while receiving less. Behind these increases are a mix of global supply chain issues, climate events affecting agriculture, and corporate price setting, with some supermarket giants reporting record profits while customers struggle to afford the basics. Add to this rising fuel costs, which affect freight and transport, and it's no wonder the checkout total feels like a gut punch every time. For low and middle income families, the impact is immediate and constant. It's no longer about treats or luxury brands. Many are being forced to choose between food groups, skip fresh produce, or rely on heavily processed, cheaper alternatives. Some are even turning to food banks or community pantries just to get through the week. Meal planning, budgeting apps, discount hunting, families are doing everything they can, but the reality is this: the cost of feeding a household in Australia has become unbearably high, and no amount of frugal shopping tips can make up for a system where the basics are no longer affordable. Number 3. Rent and housing prices are unaffordable. One of the most devastating impacts of the cost of living crisis in Australia is the housing market, where both renters and aspiring homeowners are facing conditions that many experts now call a national emergency. Whether you're trying to buy your first home or just keep a roof over your head, the numbers simply don't add up anymore. In major cities like Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane, the median house price has soared past $1 million, putting home ownership out of reach for most young families. Even in regional areas, once seen as more affordable, prices have surged due to demand and limited supply. As a result, people are now paying more for less, smaller homes, longer commutes, and higher mortgage repayments that eat up a huge chunk of household income. For renters, the situation is just as grim. Weekly rent prices have exploded, with increases of 20% to 40% in some suburbs over the past 2 years. And it's not just capital cities. Regional towns have also seen record rent spikes. Families are being forced to compete for fewer available properties, often paying well above advertised prices just to secure a lease. This has led to an increase in rental stress, where tenants spend more than 30% of their income on housing alone. In many cases, it's closer to half. That leaves little left for food, transport, or savings. And with no cap on rent increases in most states, tenants are at the mercy of landlords who are also trying to offset rising interest rates and property costs. The housing crisis isn't just about affordability, it's about security. Families are being pushed into overcrowded homes, forced to move frequently, or even facing homelessness. When safe, stable housing becomes a luxury, the ripple effect touches every other part of life, from work to education to mental health. Number 2, childcare costs are skyrocketing. Childcare, once seen as a support system for working parents, has now become one of the biggest financial burdens for Australian families. For many, the cost of sending a child to daycare or early learning isn't just high, it's crippling. In some parts of the country, particularly in major cities, families are paying up to $180 per day per child for full-time care. That adds up quickly, especially when both parents are working just to keep the household running. Even with the childcare subsidy, the out-of-pocket costs can still be enormous, particularly for middle-income families who don't qualify for the highest subsidy rates. And for those with 2 or more children in care, the costs can easily rival or exceed a monthly mortgage repayment. The result? Many parents, especially mothers, are being forced to make a painful decision. Stay home and sacrifice a career, or return to work and hand over most of their salary to childcare centres. It's a choice that no family should have to make, yet it's become an everyday reality for thousands across the country. To make matters worse, there are growing shortages of childcare spots, especially in regional and low-income areas. Some families are stuck on waiting lists for months, while others are forced to accept care arrangements that don't suit their work hours or aren't ideal for their child's development. In some cases, parents are cutting back on work hours, not by choice, but because childcare simply isn't available when they need it. Childcare is meant to support families, boost the economy, and give children a strong start in life. But instead, it's becoming yet another factor locking families into financial stress. When working more actually leaves you worse off, the system is clearly failing the very people it's supposed to help. Number 1, wage growth has flatlined. At the heart of Australia's cost of living crisis is a simple but devastating truth. Wages have barely moved, while the cost of almost everything else has soared. For over a decade now, wage growth in Australia has been stagnant, and in real terms, adjusted for inflation, many workers are actually earning less than they were 10 years ago. According to data from the Australian Bureau of Statistics, real wage growth has flatlined since 2013, with only minor increases that have been completely outpaced by inflation. This means that even if your pay has technically gone up a little, its actual buying power has gone down. You might be earning more dollars on paper, but each one buys you less fuel, less food, less housing, and less peace of mind. Meanwhile, the cost of essentials, like rent, groceries, fuel, and utilities, has climbed dramatically. The gap between what people earn and what they need to live a stable life has never been wider. And it's not just low-income earners feeling the pinch. Even middle-income households, people with full-time jobs, university degrees, and decades of experience are struggling to keep up. This wage stagnation isn't just frustrating, it's creating a deep sense of economic insecurity. People are putting off milestones like buying a home, having children, or saving for retirement because they simply can't afford them. And for younger Australians entering the workforce, the path to financial independence feels harder than ever before. Employers, meanwhile, often blame tight budgets, global uncertainty, or rising operational costs. But for workers, the result is the same, working harder than ever, with less to show for it. When wages can't keep pace with living costs, no amount of budgeting or sacrifice is enough. It's not a personal failing, it's a structural problem, and it's leaving millions stuck in a cycle that's nearly impossible to break. Australia's cost of living crisis isn't just a headline, it's a daily reality for millions of families. Behind every shocking statistic is a real person making impossible choices, whether to pay the electricity bill or fill the fridge, whether to work more hours or spend time with their children, whether to seek medical help or wait just a little longer. What's most alarming is how normalised this struggle has become. We're told to tighten our belts, shop smarter, or hustle harder, but the truth is, the system is stacked against ordinary families. Wages haven't kept up, rent is through the roof, groceries, childcare, education, healthcare, all basic necessities, have turned into financial stresses, and instead of getting meaningful support, families are met with hidden fees, shrinking services, and policies that no longer reflect the real cost of living. This crisis doesn't just affect low-income households. Middle-class families, once considered financially secure, are now living paycheck to paycheck, with no room for error. One emergency, a car repair, a job loss, an unexpected bill, can send everything into a spiral. It's a constant balancing act that's leaving people exhausted, anxious, and uncertain about the future. But perhaps the most dangerous part of this crisis is that it's happening in silence. We talk about inflation, interest rates, and economic indicators, but we don't talk enough about the emotional and human toll, the missed milestones, the silent stress, the feeling of working hard and still falling behind. If we want change, we need to acknowledge the full picture and start demanding policies that truly support working families. Because survival shouldn't be this hard in one of the world's wealthiest countries, and no one should have to choose between living with dignity and simply getting by.